After shooting with the Leica Q3 for the better part of the last 2 years as my main everyday camera, I finally made the switch into the Leica M system, trading my Q3 for a Leica M11. 4 trips and over 3,000 photos later, and I think I immediately regret my decision. Let me explain. Almost exactly a year ago, I borrowed the Leica M11P for a month. I shot on it exclusively for 30 days, and I eventually came to the conclusion that the Q3 just made more sense. Fast forward to today, and the call to the M system finally won over. I ended up trading my Q3 and a few other bits of camera gear for an M11, and then proceeded to take it with me as my only photo camera to Kauai for my honeymoon, Wyoming for a job with the tourism board, the Sawtooth for a backpacking and camping trip, and then just a bunch of other random images like with my Safari Porsche. So a very healthy mix of paid work, my typical travel and adventure style stuff, and just some of life's most important memories. So I feel like I have given it a very fair shake. Now, if it wasn't obvious, this is not sponsored by Leica, but it is sponsored by Artlist, so more on that in a minute. Now, I really love the rangefinder system, the portability, and just the wealth of lenses and the flexibility that the M11 offers compared to the Q3. And I think there are a lot of others out there who have picked up a Q or Q2 or a Q3 as a gateway drug and are considering doing the same in making the jump into the M. So I'm here to help many of you avoid making the same mistake that I have. But let's first talk about some of the things that I do love. First and foremost, the M system will absolutely make you a better photographer. While the Q3 is great for slowing you down, the M11 just takes this to another level. I truly think that limitations drive creativity, and in the world of photography, there is no better limitation than that of the M11. I think the rangefinder is still the best way to do manual focus, and with a rangefinder, you get really intimate with your subject, whether it's a landscape or a person or some other inanimate object. I've said this before, and I still believe it to be true, that the M11 is the most pure form of photography while still giving you some of the modern creature comforts of a digital camera. It's truly just so fun that you'll find yourself taking photos of things that normally you wouldn't care to even see otherwise. You go looking for photo-worthy moments, and over these last few months shooting with it, I feel like I've kind of transitioned from just taking bangers to, more visual storytelling. It's just changed the way that I view photography in a way that no other camera has to this point. Could I take most of these photos on the Q3 or any other camera for that matter? Absolutely. Is the sensor and color science and image quality also pretty much the same as the Q3? Also yes, but it doesn't have that same joy to it, so you don't end up trying to capture as much. Leica has been making their M series cameras for literal decades, many of which are much cheaper, albeit still very expensive. So why would you choose the M11 or the M11P over one of their older models? First, that 60 megapixel sensor. That, despite being over 5 years old, it remains the best full frame photography sensor available. It gives us incredible resolution and the ability to crop to our heart's content. So if you're only using a 28mm, you're still able to crop in for plenty of detailed shots. You also get access to the Leica Photos app, which is far and away the best camera app of any of the camera brands. It connects quickly, the UI is fantastic. You can really quickly download full res raw images wirelessly, and you can manage the firmware within the app as well, which, speaking of, I know there have been some issues with M11s freezing in the past, and I did have one such issue on the M11P that I borrowed last year. But I've had zero issues with this so far running the latest firmware. So if you're looking around forums or you're watching other videos and you're concerned about that problem, I think it has been solved. However, one annoying thing with the app is that it doesn't allow you to download the Leica looks from the app onto the M11. I actually really like the looks that they've developed, and it just doesn't make sense to me why the Q3 and the SL series do have it and the M11 doesn't, because like there are Leica looks, but you can't download the new ones from the app. The M11 also has a bit of internal storage as well. Not as much as the 256 gigs on the M11P, but you still get 64 gigs, which is great for backup in those scenarios where you forget your memory card at home, which we've all been there, it does happen. And the setup of the M11 with the memory card being in the battery slot, it is easier to accidentally leave this at home. So yeah, a great high-res, beautiful image, really stellar connectivity, and a simple UI, just sort of all combine to make this that perfect intersection of modern simplicity. So let's talk lenses, because a reason to go with an M is because you can have interchangeable lenses. Now, I feel like a downside of an M11 versus something older like an M10 or even older than that is that the higher resolution sensor can show some of the flaws of the older or cheaper lenses more quickly. So you might end up needing to spend a little bit more on your lens setup than if you went with an older option. When I picked up my M11, I also got the 28 Summicron V2 and a 50 Summilux spherical. So this is the one before the close focus one. I think they're both the ones before the close focus one. TT Artisan also sent over their 35 f2 APO lens. It's a beefy boy, but I'm gonna be testing this out and making another video on this in particular, so be sure to subscribe if you have not already. I figured I just might as well dive headfirst and give myself every opportunity to be happy with the images. And honestly, I very much am. I feel like especially this 50 and 28 combo provide the perfect level of image quality and character that you really want to achieve that Leica look. And the fact that I could bring these lenses with me just strung over my shoulder or in my pocket while traveling around means that you could achieve really great image quality at multiple focal lengths without lugging around a big system. Like, this was pretty much all I brought with me on my honeymoon, which is obviously a very important trip that I wanted to capture well, and I felt like I could do just about everything I wanted to with a very small kit. And while I love the 28mm Summilux on the Q3, being able to have more choice around your lens selection, be it from a character or a focal length perspective, that's a huge benefit of the M11. For those that have used the Q3 or any of the Q series, one thing I'll want to call out is if you're considering an M11, that 28 Summilux on the Q series is very unique and not something that you can easily replicate on the M11. And maybe this is a good time to kind of transition into the things that are making me regret this switch. But first, one thing I'm not regretting is Artlist. You probably have heard of Artlist as a great place to get royalty-free music. But in addition to this, they keep on adding new tools and features that keep making our lives as creatives so much easier. My new favorite is the voice-to-voice feature, which allows you to upload a recording of your voice and then select which voice you want to use to replace it with a high-quality AI voiceover. It'll then match the
pacing, tone, and intonation of your own voice and replace it with a voiceover.
There's obviously other tools out here that can do AI voices, but they often sound like AI because it's really hard to dictate the pacing and the tone that you want to come across. And Artlist trains all of these voices on paid voice actors too, so you can feel comfortable using AI responsibly.
Plus, they have a bunch of effects, like you can make it sound like you're talking on the phone.
Hello?
Yo, hey man, what's up? Yo, do you want to go rip the Porsches today?
Yeah, I could be keen.
Okay, sweet. I'll see you in a sec. And if you really want to execute on your next big idea, that thing that's been in the back of your mind forever, Artlist also just launched this year's 100K fund. So no matter what type of creator you are, you can pitch that one big crazy idea and Artlist will give one of you $100,000 to make it happen. Just post your video on your socials showcasing your $100,000 idea, tag artlist.io, and use the hashtag Artlist100KFund, and fill out the link in the description of this video, and you can enter now until August 24th. And as always, a huge thank you to Artlist for sponsoring today's video. So the Q3 is nearly perfect when shooting wide open. There's very little distortion or vignetting. It's pretty tack sharp across the frame, and it somehow doesn't feel overly sharp or clinical. While I'm not positive, I think a lot of this has to do with being an integrated lens. So I think there's a lot of corrections being done in the camera that help with this level of perfection. With the M11, more of the character flaws are gonna start to show up. With a lens this small, it's going to have some flaws, and it just overall makes the lenses less reliable, especially when you're shooting wide open. Now, this isn't meant to be a review of any of these lenses in particular, but having tested a bunch and owning some of the more expensive options, I can say that things like edge sharpness, vignetting, chromatic aberration, etc., all are going to be very present issues, especially at the wider apertures. I almost always shot completely wide open on the Q2 and the Q3. And aside from some of the autofocus issues that are present in those cameras, you could feel really confident in the image that you get. But now with the Summicron and especially with the Summilux 50, you just aren't going to nail a clean image as often. Now, obviously a big portion of this is due to manually focusing a rangefinder, and that's something that you improve with as you get better at using it. But when you start to introduce a moving subject or longer focal lengths, you're gonna end up needing to stop down to feel confident that you're gonna nail that shot. And the lack of stabilization means you're gonna be even more limited in your exposure settings, especially compared to the Q3. So if you thought you could just go from a Summilux Q3 to a Summilux M11 and everything's gonna be an easy one-to-one, it's just not going to happen. Both from a character flaws standpoint and actually nailing focus standpoint. But again, some of these imperfections in character are why a lot of people love Leica glass. Honestly, myself included. Now, I still think one of my biggest complaints about the M11 is how it handles metering. No matter which metering mode you use, it's very difficult to find a balance of preserving your highlights and getting enough detail in the shadows. The M11 makes some just wild decisions when displaying metering or when using something like aperture priority. And even the simple act of composing horizontal versus composing vertically, drastically different results. I've even done a few high-speed bursts where your exposure shouldn't change if I'm just holding down the shutter, but it can change by like a full stop in between two images that are taken a fraction of a second apart. Like, why? Why is it doing that? Now, the Q3 is also somewhat prone to this, but because you're still using live view so much, you're much more easily able to diagnose and see what's happening before you take your shot. With the M11, on the other hand, because you're looking through a rangefinder so much more frequently, you don't really quickly realize that your image is poorly exposed until you check it on the back of the screen and you're like, wow, that is really dark. I found highlight weighted metering to work the best, but these are still issues that are far too common for a camera that is this expensive. Like, it doesn't do much, it just takes photos. It should be able to do something as simple as metering well. But I think my biggest source of regret comes from my style of shooting. When I'm using the M11 and I'm just taking photos, nothing else, it is the most fun and enjoyable camera I have ever used for that. But the fact of the matter is that I am very infrequently just taking photos. As someone who's always doing video as well, I'm almost always having a second camera with me. Now, don't get me wrong, I actually really like having a dedicated photo and video camera, so I'm not upset at the lack of video capabilities on the M11. Where I do run into issues, however, is trying to manually focus using both hands on the M11 while somehow precariously balancing my FX3 on the other hand, especially because I'm mostly filming with like a big manual focus anamorphic lens, like putting that here and then like trying to do this. It just doesn't really work. Maybe this sounds like a very niche complaint because you don't care about video or you're not shooting on an anamorphic lens. That's reasonable. But with this being a camera that you're carrying around with you everywhere, it also often means that you're maybe doing something else other than explicitly taking photos. Maybe you're having your coffee, you're out with the dog, or you're just enjoying the company of your wife on your honeymoon. Having both hands dedicated to taking every photo just doesn't work sometimes. So I think that's where I'm having this sort of mental struggle with this camera. I got it because I wanted to have something that's high quality images, multiple focal lengths, still lightweight, I could take anywhere, but still like have some soul and some character to it, but still be good enough to do professional work. I wanted it to be a camera that I could reach for every time unless there was a scenario that required otherwise. But I'm feeling like it'll instead be the camera I reach for just for the joy of taking photos. And like, that is okay, but it's sure an expensive way to do it. And you're still probably better off getting something else. So yeah, I do kind of regret buying it, but at this point, I'm keeping it because it is still super fun. And I get the sense that many Leica shooters probably have this same mental struggle as well. So maybe let's commiserate in the comments together. And with that, I'll see you in the next one. Peace.